Hi folks, this is Karim Raouf from IT Visualizer channel. We will continue our lab, the Matrix Labs, the video number 57. I've been discussing in the previous video the following while still working with the Purple Knight Active Directory Security Assessment tool, which is a free tool that will generate a report that will discuss the different or discovered security holes in your Active Directory. So we have stopped the last time at the group of tests called Active Directory Infrastructure Security, which will seek and see if there is any security holes in your Active Directory infrastructure, or specifically the configuration of your Active Directory infrastructure. Okay, so the first test is saying that anonymous access to Active Directory is enabled. What is this test exactly? It will seek or will scan and see if any anonymous user can enumerate the users and groups and computers and maybe shares in your domain. What is an anonymous user? Anonymous user is a user that is not a member of the domain. So this is very, very critical because a hacker is normally not a part of your domain, or he is not a member of your domain. So if this option is enabled, a hacker can simply scan your Active Directory and grab information concerning your users, groups, and computers and shares. Even though it will not help him to attack your, or it will not help him to hack your domain, but this is the first step. So we need to make sure that he could not gather any information concerning our Active Directory, because this is the first step in hacking any organization. So we need to make sure that this option is disabled. So how we can do that? This is simply by configuring a group policy. How did I know that, even though this is not stated in the Purple Knight report? Because this was discussed in another report called Testamo, which was focusing on the same point. So how we can close this issue? It says that we should disable a group policy called let everyone permissions apply to anonymous users. This group policy should be disabled. If it is enabled, then it will be very, very dangerous, because then a hacker can scan your Active Directory and get a lot of information concerning the users, groups, and shares. Okay, so what is the everyone group? If we go there and see, in simple terms, authenticated users include all users who logged in with a username and a password, while everyone group includes password protected accounts and built-in accounts such as guest and local service. The authenticated users group include local and domain user accounts, while the everyone group includes additional security accounts. So the everyone contains some of the most important, or as it says, it contains some of the most important accounts, for example, like the local service, and contains accounts like guest account. So if we go further in this URL, we can actually do something here. He's saying that, as mentioned above, the authenticated users group include all users who are authenticated with valid credentials in the OS, while the everyone group includes the authenticated users group and the guest accounts. It include both. Okay, in Windows. So there are changes in the membership of these groups. Below is a brief explanation of built-in accounts in Windows. Guest account, anonymous account is the member of everyone group, not an authenticated group. The anonymous account is not a member of either group unless a specific everyone group is useful for granting permissions to all users, but includes the guest and anonymous accounts, which may not be desirable in some cases. Let's see if we can get a little bit of summarization for this page. So if we can go further and see this one, everyone versus authenticated users. The everyone group includes all users, including built-in accounts like guest and local service, while authenticated users include only those who have logged in with valid credentials. Security implementation. The everyone group is less secure as it includes more accounts whereas authenticated user is recommended for NTFS permissions to exclude null sessions. Libidi Data Security Platform. This platform ensures or helps secure Active Directory groups by monitoring user behavior, detecting threats, and managing permissions and inactive accounts. I think this is a third-party program. Anyway, so what I'm saying here, we should not grant anonymous users permissions of the everyone or the members of the everyone group, okay? Because this give it or give the hacker or give the anonymous user some rights that will help him to gather information concerning our Active Directory, okay? So this is how we can close this section, okay? Again, here if we see the description, it's possible, though not recommended, to enable anonymous access to AD. This indicator looks for presence of the flag that enables anonymous access. Anonymous access would allow unauthenticated users to query Active Directory. Anonymous access to Active Directory allows an attacker to enumerate accounts and perform attacks like password spray, as well as to enumerate the domain to gather information that can model attack paths. This is a significant risk as the complexity of AD often presents many opportunities for attackers, and anonymous access allow them an easy way to find such opportunities. Anyway, so we should disable this group policy, and it is disabled by default, by the way. So if you go and see this group policy, this policy setting determines what other permissions are granted for anonymous connections to the device. If you enable this policy setting, anonymous users can enumerate the names of the domain accounts and shared folders and perform certain other activities. This capability is convenient, for example, when an administrator wants to grant access to users in a trusted domain that doesn't maintain a reciprocal trust. Okay. By default, this token that is created for anonymous connection does not include the everyone SID. Therefore, permissions that are assigned to everyone group do not apply to anonymous users. So this is what we are focusing on. Okay. So here we say possible values for this group policy enabled. The everyone SID is added to the token that is created for anonymous connections, and anonymous users can access any resources for which the everyone group has assigned permissions. Okay, disabled. The everyone SID is removed from the token that is created for anonymous connections. So basically, if you enable this group policy, any anonymous user will be given or will be a member of the everyone group. So this is not what we need to do. Best practice is to disable, as you can see here, configuration so and so, policy management, restart, configuration, security consideration. This section describes how an attacker might exploit a feature or its configuration, how to implement the countermeasures, and the possible negative consequences of a countermeasure implementation. Vulnerability. Unauthorized users, okay, can list accounts and share resources and use the information to attempt to guess passwords, perform social engineering attacks, or launch DOS attacks. So this is how we can close this this feature, or it is disabled by default, but maybe for some reason it is enabled. So we need to check this group policy. I need to see what are the permissions for everyone. The everyone, if we go there, the everyone here is saying what are the permissions granted for the everyone group. The everyone group, let me see here, between everyone set, let's see, everyone so and so. Okay, everyone group is the least secure as it purely encompasses all users. Frequently, the everyone group contains the same set of users as the users and authenticated users group. Nonetheless, if the guest account is enabled, users who log in as a guest are a part of everyone, but not users or authenticated users. I need the rights for the everyone group. Okay, so let's ask a simple question. If we go there and ask Perplexity, what are the permissions granted for the everyone group in Active Directory. If you can ask him a simple question and see what will be the answer. The Everyone group is a special identity group that includes all users who logged into the network, encompassing both unauthenticated users and the guest account. So these are the members. Okay, if we enable the group policy that says that anonymous users are a member of Everyone group, then they will be included in the group. Understanding the permissions associated with that group is crucial for managing security and access control within an organization. So the Everyone group has the following characteristics and permissions. Wide access. Members of the Everyone group has access to system resources, which can include file shares, printers, and other network resources. This access is often set to allow, read, and execute permissions by default. Membership. So who are the membership of this group? All authenticated users, which have logged with valid credentials. The guest account is typically disabled in many environments. In earlier versions of Windows prior to 2003, it's also included anonymous login users, but this has been changed. Okay, so anonymous user was added to this group before, but in 2003 Windows operating system, but it was removed for security reasons. Security implementation. Granting permissions to Everyone group can pose security risks since it includes the guest account and any authenticated user. It can inadvertently allow unauthorized access to sensitive information if not managed carefully. For example, if a folder's NTFS permissions are set to allow everyone to read or execute files, any user on the network could potentially access those files. Best practice, it's generally recommended to limit the use of Everyone group in NTFS permissions. Instead, specific groups like authenticated users or individual authenticated users group, of course, or individual users account should be assigned permissions to ensure tighter security. Administrators can often prefer using the authenticated users group for shared resources because it excludes guest accounts and provides a more secure way to manage access. So very, very good answer. In summary, while the Everyone group provides a convenient way to grant access across a wide array of users within an Active Directory environment, it should be used judiciously due to its broad scope. Proper management of this group permissions is essential for maintaining security and preventing unauthorized access to sensitive resources within an organization. So very, very good answer. And now we know why we need to disable this or to disable anonymous access to the Active Directory by disabling this group policy. Okay, network access, let everyone permissions apply to anonymous users. And we have seen anonymous everyone permissions for what they can do. Okay, so now we can go to the next test, okay, which is anonymous NSPI access to Active Directory enabled. This is another feature which allow anonymous users, okay, or let's see what it does exactly. Anonymous namespace provider interface access on AD is a feature that allows anonymous RPC based bindings to the AD. This indicator detects when NSP access is enabled. So I think here he's saying that enabling this feature will enable any anonymous remote access to your Active Directory. Okay, so I think here is talking about that, and we will see actually, or we see the AI tools explaining this feature NSPI, and he's saying that NSPI access is rarely ever enabled. So if you find it enabled, it should be a cause for concern. Okay, so we need to see or ask Perplexity to explain this topic. What is the NSPI? So let's read it loudly and see what does NSP access or what is NSP access exactly. If you go there and read it loudly, if you can go further.
Anonymous Name Service Provider Interface, NSPI, access. What is NSPI access? NSPI, Name Service Provider Interface, is a protocol that allows messaging clients to access and manipulate addressing data stored by an Active Directory server. 4. When anonymous access to NSBI is enabled, it allows unauthenticated users to perform certain operations on the directory. Example, matrix.internal. Let's say you have an Active Directory domain called matrix.internal that is used to manage user accounts, computers, and other resources for your organization. If anonymous access to NSBI is enabled on the domain controllers for matrix.internal, it would allow any anonymous user on the network to perform operations like enumerating user accounts and email addresses, retrieving properties of user objects like phone numbers, titles, etc., modifying properties of user objects if the user has the appropriate permissions. Risks of enabling anonymous NSBI access. Enabling anonymous access to NSBI is rarely necessary and introduces significant security risks. Unauthorized information disclosure. Anonymous users can retrieve sensitive contact information and email addresses of employees. Reconnaissance for attacks. Attackers can use anonymous NSBI access to gather intelligence about user accounts and the directory structure to plan more targeted attacks. Potential for privilege escalation. If anonymous users have any write permissions, they could potentially modify user accounts or other objects to gain unauthorized access. Detecting and remediating anonymous NSBI access. Security tools like Purple Knight can detect if anonymous NSBI access is enabled on domain controllers. 8. If it is enabled, it should be considered a high-risk configuration that requires immediate remediation. Determine if anonymous NSBI access is required. In most cases, it is not needed and can be safely disabled. Disable anonymous NSBI access. Use the Active Directory Administrative Center to set the network access. Let everyone permissions apply to anonymous users policy to disabled. Monitor for any adverse impact. Ensure that disabling anonymous access does not break any critical applications that rely on it. Harden other anonymous access settings. Review and restrict other anonymous access permissions on the domain controllers as per security best practices. 3. By detecting and disabling anonymous NSBI access, you can significantly reduce the attack surface of your Active Directory environment and prevent unauthorized access to sensitive directory data.
So very, very good answer. If we go to ChatGPT and try to ask it the same question, here you go. If you go there and ask it the same question like this, and let's see what will be the answer. Okay, I think we need to go. I think here we have already the icon for reading the answer. No, I do not think so. So we need to do like this. Okay, so here you go. This is it. And then read it loudly, I think. Yes, read out section.
Understanding anonymous NSBI access in Active Directory. A real-world example with matrix.internal. Description. Let's say your organization, matrix.internal, uses Microsoft Active Directory, AD, to manage all user accounts, permissions, and network resources. Within AD, there's a component called the Name Service Provider Interface, NSBI. NSBI is primarily used by email clients like Microsoft Outlook to communicate with the global address list, retrieving information like usernames, email addresses, and other directory details. Under normal circumstances, when a client like Outlook wants to access this information, it must authenticate with AD, meaning the user provides valid credentials to prove they have permission to access this data. However, if anonymous NSBI access is enabled on your AD, it allows anyone, even without valid credentials, to connect to your AD using Remote Procedure Call, RPC, protocols and retrieve directory information. This means an external attacker could potentially gain access to sensitive user information without needing to log in. In your case, an assessment was conducted on matrix.internal to check if anonymous NSBI access is enabled. Likelihood of compromise. Enabling anonymous NSBI access is highly unusual and poses significant security risks. It's rarely enabled in secure environments because Unauthorized access. It allows unauthenticated users to access directory information. Information gathering. Attackers can use this access to gather user data for phishing attacks or to plan further intrusions. Regulatory compliance. Exposing user data might lead to non-compliance with data protection regulations like GDPR. Therefore, if Matrix.internal had anonymous NSPI access enabled, it would be a serious cause for concern, indicating a potential vulnerability that could be exploited. Result: the assessment found no evidence of exposure on Matrix.internal. This means that anonymous NSPI access.
Just a moment, guys. So let's continue, guys, the answer.
Access is not enabled, and your AD is secure against this particular vulnerability. Remediation steps. Since anonymous NSPI access is not enabled on Matrix.internal, no action is required at this time. However, it's good practice to regularly audit settings. Periodically check your AD configurations to ensure that settings remain secure. Monitor for changes. Implement monitoring to alert you if critical settings like NSPI access are altered. Stay informed. Keep up to date with security best practices and patches related to Active Directory. Conclusion. By ensuring that anonymous NSPI access is disabled, Matrix.internal maintains a strong security posture, protecting sensitive user and directory information from unauthorized access. Regular assessments help in identifying potential vulnerabilities early, allowing your organization to address them proactively. Additional note: if in the future anonymous NSPI access is found to be enabled without a justified business need, immediate steps should be taken to disable it. Disable anonymous NSPI access. Modify the registry or use group policy to prevent anonymous binds. Review security policies. Ensure that all AD settings comply with your organization's security policies. Educate IT staff. Make sure that all team members are aware of the risks associated with enabling such features. By staying vigilant, Matrix.internal can continue to safeguard its network and user data against potential threats.
So we can see here another tip was added concerning this NSPI, which is basically used with the email clients. Okay, so this is one important note. I think it's correct, even though Perplexity didn't mention that. So if we go there and see the answer of Claude, let's see the answer and see what will be added, or if Claude will add 3.5, Sonnet will add any additional information.
Air Active Directory environment. Copy. Retry. Certainly. Let's break this down using a real-world example in the context of Active Directory, AD. Imagine Matrix Corporation, a large tech company, has an internal Active Directory domain called matrix.internal. This domain manages all user accounts, computers, and resources within the company network. The content you've provided is describing a security feature and potential vulnerability related to the Anonymous Name Service Provider Interface, NSPI, access. Let's explain each part. Description. In Matrix Corp's AD, there's a feature called NSPI that allows applications to query the directory for information. Normally, this requires authentication. However, if anonymous NSPI access is enabled, it means that anyone, even without valid credentials, could potentially query the directory for information. Likelihood of compromise. For Matrix Corp, enabling anonymous NSPI access would be like leaving a side door to their office building unlocked. It's rarely done because it's a significant security risk. If the IT team at Matrix Corp found this feature enabled, it would be as surprising and concerning as finding that unlocked side door. Result. In this case, the security scan of Matrix.internal showed no evidence of exposure. This means that Matrix Corp's AD is configured correctly, with anonymous NSPI access disabled. It's like checking all the doors and finding them properly locked. Remediation steps. Since no issue was found, no action is needed. Matrix Corp's IT team can be reassured that this particular security setting is correctly configured. Real-world impact. If anonymous NSBI access were enabled on matrix.internal, an attacker might be able to query the directory without authentication, potentially gathering information about Matrix Corp's internal structure, user accounts, or other sensitive data. This information could be used to plan more targeted attacks, like phishing campaigns or attempts to guess passwords for specific user accounts. It could potentially violate compliance requirements for data protection, as it would make internal directory information more accessible than it should be. By keeping this feature disabled, Matrix Corp is maintaining a proper security posture for their Active Directory environment.
Even though I don't like the answer of Claude, but I think the best one is Perplexity, and then comes ChatGPT o1, and then the least one from my point of view is Claude 3.5 Sonnet. So we can continue and see the next step, which is dangerous control passes expose certificate containers. So here is focusing upon if there is non-default principles. Here principles is referring to a user or a computer or a group. Non-default, okay, Active Directory has default groups. Okay, he's talking about the non-default groups or users or computers. Okay, with permissions on the NT auth certificates container. This container holds the intermediate CA certificate that can be used to authenticate to AD. So he's talking about if any non-default user or group or computer has access to this container, which is basically from the name, this is concerning the certificates. Certificates are used to authenticate users to the Active Directory or encrypt data. So if an hacker or a non-default user has access to this container, there he can issue certificates, which is a very, very dangerous thing to do. So we need to make sure that only the proper groups or users, actually I think they're not computers, users or groups or computers have access to this container. If we see here that description or likelihood of compromise, these control passes allow adding a malicious certificate authority, which allow an attacker to authenticate as arbitrary users or services. So basically we are talking about the container that contains the certificates. From what I know or what I have understand, that he's talking about a location or container that contains the certificates which is used for authentication. This should be protected, and only certain users and groups or computers have access to this container. If we go to Perplexity and ask it to explain this topic, if we go there and see here, you can ask it a simple question: non-default with permissions, principles permissions on NT auth certificates container. He's talking what is NT auth certificates container. Very, very good. I like Perplexity because it is very, very logical in thinking or describing or listing the info. So he's giving like a brief about what he's talking about, and then he begin explanation. So let's see the answer of Perplexity, and then we can go to Claude and ChatGPT to ask the same question.
Non-default principles with permissions on NTAuth certificates container. What is the NTAuth certificates container? The NTAuth certificates container is an Active Directory object that holds the intermediate certificate authority, CA, certificates trusted for authentication in the domain. It is located at text CN equals NTAuth certificates, CN equals public key services, CN equals services, CN equals configuration, DC equals matrix, DC equals internal. By default, only the enterprise admins and domain admins groups have permissions to modify this container. The CA certificates in this container are used for certificate-based authentication scenarios like smart card logon, Kerberos authentication using certificates, enrollment on behalf of EOBO, private key archival/recovery, risks of granting permissions to non-default principals. If non-default user accounts or groups are granted permissions to modify the NTAuth certificates container, It introduces significant security risks. Ability to add malicious CA certificates. An attacker with permissions can add a rogue CA certificate they control to the container. This allows them to issue certificates to impersonate any user or service in the domain. Persistent backdoor for authentication. The rogue CA can be used to generate certificates for the attacker to authenticate as any user, bypassing security controls like password changes. Lateral movement and privilege escalation. With the ability to impersonate users, the attacker can move laterally across the domain and potentially escalate privileges to domain admin. Difficult to detect and remediate. Certificate-based authentication leaves little forensic evidence compared to password-based attacks. Revoking the malicious CA may not immediately kick out the attacker. Example, matrix.internal. Let's say an attacker gains initial access to a workstation in the matrix.internal domain. They discover that the help desk group has been granted right permissions on the NTOS certificates container. The attacker adds their own CA certificate to the container using tools like certoodle.exe. With this malicious CA, the attacker can now generate a certificate to impersonate the CEO and access sensitive resources. Authenticate as any user to internal servers and services. Move laterally across the domain using the forged certificates. Maintain persistent access even if the CEO's password is changed. Detecting and remediating this attack would be very difficult, as the attacker's certificates would appear legitimate to the domain controllers. Removing the malicious CA from the container may not immediately revoke the already issued certificates. Hardening recommendations. To prevent this attack path, restrict permissions on NTOS certificates. Ensure only enterprise admins and domain admins have right permissions. Remove any non-default principals with right access. Monitor for changes. Implement auditing and alerting to detect any modifications to the NTOS certificates container. Enforce certificate issuance policies. Use certificate authority policies to restrict which CAs can issue certificates for authentication purposes. Regularly review trusted CAs. Audit the CAs in the NTOS certificates container and remove any unused or unnecessary CAs. By following these best practices, you can reduce the attack surface and prevent malicious CAs from being added to the NTOS certificates container in the matrix.internal domain.
So very, very good answer and detailed one. If you go to ChatGPT, let's see the answer, but actually I need to stop for a minute. So here we can see the answer of ChatGPT 01, but I will wait for a moment and come back. So let's continue, guys. Here we will see what ChatGPT 01 will say about the NT auth certificates container and why it is very important to protect this container in the Active Directory.
Understanding NTOS certificates permissions in Active Directory. A real-world example with matrix.internal. Description. In your organization, matrix.internal Active Directory AD is used to manage user authentication and access to resources. Within AD, there is a special container called NTOS certificates. This container stores intermediate certificate authority CA certificates that are trusted by AD for authenticating users and services. By default, only specific, highly trusted principals like enterprise admins or domain admins should have permissions to modify the NTOS certificates container. If a non-default principal, a user or group that isn't normally granted such permissions, has access to this container, they could potentially add their own CA certificates. This would allow them to issue valid certificates for any user or service in the domain, effectively letting them impersonate any account within matrix.internal. An assessment was conducted to check for any non-default principals with permissions on the NTOS certificates container in your AD environment. Likelihood of compromise. If non-default principals have permissions on the NTOS certificates container, it poses a significant security risk. Adding malicious certificate authorities. Unauthorized users could introduce rogue CA certificates. Impersonation of users or services. Attackers can authenticate as any user or service by issuing valid certificates from the malicious CA. Bypassing security measures. This method allows attackers to bypass typical authentication safeguards without immediately raising suspicion. Given these risks, such control paths are critical vulnerabilities. They enable attackers to gain high-level access and potentially compromise the entire network of Matrix.internal. Result: the assessment found no evidence of exposure. This means that only default, trusted principals have permissions on the NTOS certificates container in Matrix.internal. There are no unauthorized users or groups with the ability to modify or add certificates to this container. Remediation steps. Since there is no current exposure, no immediate action is required. However, to maintain a strong security posture, consider the following. Regular audits. Periodically review permissions on the NTOS certificates container and other critical AD components. Monitor for changes. Implement monitoring solutions that alert you to any changes in permissions or contents of the NTOS certificates container. Enforce the principle of least privilege. Ensure that only necessary and trusted principals have permissions to modify critical containers. Employee training. Educate IT staff about the importance of maintaining strict permissions on sensitive AD containers. Conclusion. By ensuring that only default, trusted principals have permissions on the NTOS certificates container, Matrix.internal effectively mitigates the risk of attackers adding malicious certificate authorities. Regular monitoring and adherence to best practices help protect your organization's AD environment from potential compromise. Additional note: if future assessments detect non-default principals with permissions on the NTOS certificates container, immediate action should be taken. Revoke unauthorized permissions. Remove any non-default principals from having access to the container. Investigate. Determine how these permissions were granted and whether any malicious activity has occurred. Strengthen security policies. Update policies to prevent unauthorized changes and enforce stricter permission controls. Implement additional security measures. Consider using AD security tools that provide enhanced monitoring and protection for critical containers. By proactively managing permissions and staying vigilant, Matrix.internal can continue to safeguard its network and users from potential threats.
So I think this answer is not that much, or I don't think it's better than Perplexity answer. Let's see the answer of Claude concerning the same question.
Start new chat. Start. Let's break this down using a real-world example in the context of Active Directory for Matrix Corporation. Matrix.internal. Description. In Matrix Corp's Active Directory, there's a special container called NTOS certificates. This container is like a secure vault that holds important certificates. These certificates are used to verify the authenticity of users and services trying to access the network. Normally, only a select few built-in system accounts, the default principals, should have permissions to modify this container. The indicator described here is checking if any unexpected accounts, non-default principals, have been given permissions to access or modify this container. Likelihood of compromise. If an unauthorized account has permissions on this container, it's a serious security risk. Here's why. Imagine Matrix Corp uses key cards for physical access to their buildings. The NTOS certificates container is like the system that decides which key cards are valid. If an attacker gains access to this system, they could potentially A. Create a master key card that opens all doors. B. Create fake key cards that appear valid but are actually controlled by the attacker. In the digital world, this translates to an attacker being able to create certificates that would allow them to impersonate any user or service in the Matrix Corp network, potentially even high-level administrators. Result: the scan of Matrix.internal showed no evidence of exposure. This is good news from Matrix Corporation. It means that no unauthorized accounts have permissions on the NTOS certificates container. The vault is secure and only accessible by the expected system accounts. Remediation steps. Since no issues were found, no action is needed. Matrix Corp's IT team has correctly configured the permissions for this critical container. Real-world impact. If unauthorized permissions were found on the NTOS certificates container, it could indicate that Matrix Corp's network has been compromised, or that there's been a serious misconfiguration. An attacker with these permissions could potentially create certificates to impersonate any user in the organization, from regular employees to the CEO. This could lead to unauthorized access to sensitive data, systems, or resources across the entire Matrix Corp network. It could be used as a persistent backdoor, allowing an attacker to maintain access even if other compromised accounts are discovered and closed. In case of an audit or security incident, this misconfiguration could lead to serious consequences for Matrix Corp, including potential legal or regulatory issues. By maintaining proper permissions on this container, Matrix Corp is protecting itself against a sophisticated and potentially devastating form of attack. Regular checks like this help ensure that critical parts of the Active Directory infrastructure remain secure.
As we can see here, the answer is a little bit more good than ChatGPT o1, but I think the best is Perplexity because it's giving us very valuable information concerning this container. So let's continue with the tests. If we go to the next one, which is certificate templates with 3 or more insecure configurations. So here is checking the certificate templates, okay, in the container, okay, so to see if there is any misconfiguration, or especially he is looking for 4 things in any certificate template, or especially in 3 certificate templates. He is focusing upon the option which is manager approval is disabled, no authorized signature are required, SAN enabled, authentication ETU present. So if any one of these 4 options are enabled on any certificate template on the certificate server, then we have an issue here. And here he is talking about each one of these options and why enabling them is dangerous on any certificate template. Manager approval is disabled. New certificates automatically approved if the user has the correct enrollment rights. No authorized signatures are required. Okay, or certificate signing requests are not signed by any existing authorized certificate. So the certificate is not signed and it's not approved by the domain admin or the manager of the certificate server. SAN, subject alternative name enabled, allowing the creator of certificate template to specify subject alternative name, which is very, very dangerous. I can give him 2 names. For example, my name is Karim and I have an alternative name. So this can be used by the hacker. For example, if I'm telling him my name is Karim and I have an alternative name KR, for example, this can be used by the hacker saying that my name is Karim and the alternative name is X or Y or whatsoever. Though they can make the request as anyone, even as a domain admin. So this is very, very dangerous one. Authentication EQ or enhanced key usage present. If present, the EQ created from the certificate template will allow the user to authenticate with it. So this are all different options, and I think we need to let the AI tools explain more concerning every one of these features. Let me see something. I think I have already asked ChatGPT to explain these features. Let's go and see here. So for example, I think here you go, this is one of them, or here it is. These are here is the explanation, but I think I have already another one. Let me see if I think I have other ones. Let me show, because I think I have already asked it to explain it before. So let's see, maybe in the history here if I have this explained. None, okay, non-primary default, primary groups and Active Directory. Okay, the default permitted, adding directory, explain, manage the groups. So I think this is not explained by Perplexity. So anyway, let's go to ChatGPT and see how he will explain this issue. Okay, sorry. Again, let me select it.
Understanding insecure certificates.
So let's continue, guys, and see the answer of ChatGPT 01.
Certificate template configurations in Active Directory. A real-world example with matrix.internal. Description. In your organization, matrix.internal Active Directory AD certificate services are used to issue digital certificates to users, computers, and services. These certificates enable secure communication and authentication within the network. The certificates are based on certificate templates, which define the settings and permissions for the certificates issued. An assessment was conducted to check if any certificate templates in your AD Forest have at least 3 of the following insecure configurations. Manager approval is disabled. Certificates are automatically issued without requiring approval from a manager or administrator if the user has enrollment rights. No authorized signatures required. Certificate signing requests, CSRs, can be submitted and processed without being signed by an existing authorized certificate, removing an additional layer of verification. Subject Alternative Name, SAN, enabled. Allows users requesting a certificate to specify the SAN field in their CSR. This can enable them to create a certificate for any identity, including privileged accounts like domain admins. Authentication Enhanced Key Usage, EKU present. If this setting is present, the certificate can be used for authentication purposes within the network. Likelihood of compromise. If certificate templates in matrix.internal have these insecure configurations, they pose significant security risks. Automatic certificate approval. Without manager approval, any user with enrollment rights can obtain certificates without oversight, potentially leading to misuse. No authorized signatures. Allowing CSRs without authorized signatures means that certificates can be issued without verifying the legitimacy of the request, opening the door to fraudulent certificates. SAN enabled. By enabling SAN in certificate requests, a user can specify any identity in the SAN field. An attacker could create a certificate that impersonates a domain admin, gaining unauthorized access to sensitive resources. Authentication EKU present. Certificates with this EKU can be used to authenticate to services within the network. Combined with the ability to specify any identity, an attacker can authenticate as any user. Exploitation scenario. Imagine an attacker within matrix.internal gains access to a user account with certificate enrollment rights. If the certificate templates are misconfigured as described, the attacker submits a CSR with the SAN field specifying the identity of a domain admin. Since manager approval is disabled and no authorized signatures are required, the certificate is automatically issued without scrutiny. The certificate includes the authentication EKU, allowing it to be used for authentication. The attacker now possesses a valid certificate that can authenticate as a domain admin, giving them full access to the network. This kind of attack can lead to complete domain compromise, data theft, and disruption of services within matrix.internal. Result: the assessment found no evidence of exposure in matrix.internal. This means that your certificate templates do not have these insecure configurations, and appropriate security measures are in place to prevent such exploitation. Remediation steps. No action is required at this time, since there are no insecure certificate template configurations detected. However, to maintain a strong security posture, regularly review certificate templates. Periodically audit your certificate templates to ensure they adhere to security best practices.
So let's continue, guys.
Enforce manager approval. Ensure that all certificate requests require managerial or administrative approval before issuance. Require authorized signatures. Configure certificate templates to require CSRs to be signed by an existing authorized certificate. Control SAN usage. Limit the ability to specify SAN fields to trusted administrators or disable it if not necessary. Monitor for authentication EKUs. Keep track of which certificates have the authentication EKU and ensure they are issued appropriately. Conclusion. By ensuring that certificate templates are securely configured, Matrix.internal protects itself from potential attacks that exploit certificate services. Regular assessments and adherence to security best practices help prevent unauthorized access and maintain the integrity of your Active Directory environment. Additional note: if in future assessments any certificate templates are found with these insecure settings, immediate steps should be taken. Modify certificate templates. Update the templates to require manager approval, authorize signatures, and restrict SAN usage. Revoke misuse certificates. Identify and revoke any certificates that may have been issued under the insecure configurations. Investigate for potential breach. Check for any signs of malicious activity that may have resulted from the insecure templates. Educate IT personnel. Ensure that administrators understand the importance of secure certificate template configurations. By proactively managing and securing certificate services, Matrix.internal can continue to safeguard its network and resources from potential threats.
So this answer is a little bit good, but anyway, I think it's not giving me the best answer I need. So let's see, maybe the answer of Claude will give us a better answer.
Start new chat. Let's break this down using a real-world example from Matrix Corporation, Matrix.internal. Description. In Matrix Corp's Active Directory Forest, there's a system for issuing digital certificates. These certificates are like digital ID cards that verify the identity of users, computers, and services on the network. The system uses certificate templates to define how these digital ID cards are created and what they can be used for. This indicator is checking if any of these certificate templates are configured in a way that could be exploited by attackers. It's looking for at least 3 specific risky settings. A. Manager approval is disabled. B. No authorized signatures are required. C. SAN subject alternative name is enabled. D. Authentication EKU, enhanced key usage is present. Likelihood of compromise. If a certificate template has these insecure configurations, it's like having a flawed ID card system. Let's break down each risk. A. Manager approval disabled. Imagine if new employees could print their own ID cards without any oversight. Anyone with basic access could create an ID for any position. B. No authorized signatures required. This is like accepting ID cards that haven't been stamped with the official company seal. There's no way to verify if the ID was issued by a trusted authority. C. SAN enabled. This allows the person requesting the ID to specify alternative names for themselves. It's like an ID card where the holder can add multiple identities, potentially including those of high-level executives. D. Authentication EKU present. This means the ID card can be used for authentication. Combined with the other risks, it's like having an ID card that not only has multiple identities, but can also be used to access any door in the building. Result: the scan of Matrix.internal showed no evidence of exposure. This is excellent news from Matrix Corporation. It means none of their certificate templates have this dangerous combination of insecure settings. Remediation steps. Since no issues were found, no action is needed. Matrix Corp's IT team has correctly configured their certificate templates. Real-world impact. If insecure certificate templates were found, an attacker could potentially create certificates that impersonate any user in Matrix Corp, including high-level administrators. These certificates could be used to authenticate to various systems and services, potentially giving the attacker broad access across the network. The attacker could perform actions that appear to come from legitimate users, making detection and auditing much more difficult. Sensitive data could be accessed, systems could be compromised, and the attacker could potentially take control of large portions of Matrix Corp's IT infrastructure. In a worst-case scenario, the attacker could create a golden certificate that provides persistent, high-level access to the entire network, making it extremely difficult to detect and remove the intrusion. By maintaining secure configurations for their certificate templates, Matrix Corp is protecting itself against sophisticated attacks that could otherwise be devastating to the organization's security. Regular checks like this help ensure that the certificate infrastructure, a critical component of network security, remains robust and trustworthy.
So this is the answer. I think all of them are not that good. I think Perplexity also is the best one of them. So I think we can stop at the upcoming test because we have already reached 1 hour. So here dangerous control paths expose certificate templates. So here again the other test, or the test we will talk about with God will the next video, is talking about also the path to the certificate templates. So anyone can maneuver or can modify the certificate templates and give or issue a certificate that is modified, or its properties are modified. So you will see the upcoming video how this also is very, very important, and we can see that a lot of tests are focusing upon one of the most critical components or the infrastructure of the Active Directory, which is the certificate server and the certificates issued for the Active Directory. So this is very, very critical. We will talk about this test in the upcoming video. Hope this video is informative for you all, and thank you all for viewing. Thank you so much.